Now, this morning we're launching our annual Time to Talk mental health campaign, which aims to remove the stigma around mental health issues. Dublin footballer and All-Ireland winner Paul Flynn joins us now to share his personal story of losing a friend to suicide and his work as an ambassador with Pieta House, the suicide, self-harm and bereavement care charity.
Paul is also joined by the CEO of Pieta House, Brian Higgins. Well, you're both very welcome to the show. Brian, we'll get to you in a moment, but it's very brave of you, Paul, to come on and talk about such a personal story to you about your friend Alan. It was back in 2012 that Alan died by suicide.
Yeah, I suppose, like as I was alluding to, it is a difficult. It's time kind of helps a little bit, obviously, but around the time that it happened, thereafter all the friends kind of got together, and what we did was we aligned ourselves with Pieta House, did a fundraiser, and obviously raising a lot of money for Pieta House, but it was more around raising awareness around the area of sorts that, like, if something like this was to happen again, or if people were in difficult times, that they knew that they could kind of ask for help, and they, there was no problem that people may face that they couldn't seek help from somebody, so in that sense it was great to be able to do that, but at the time it was quite difficult for the whole group.
We were talking during the break about Alan, and you said it's the same as you hear often, that he was a larger-than-life character. You wouldn't have necessarily known that this was going to be something. It hit you, it blindsided you and your friends, and that's what caused you to sit down and say, if anyone's feeling this way, speak up. But that does happen a lot, doesn't it? That you just don't really know what's going on behind somebody's smile.
Yeah, and that's like you say, like a lot of people will say that they're the larger in life type of characters, which does make it that bit more difficult, So because you can't, like, when you're with them, then they may be portraying that everything is perfect and fine, but like when they're maybe on their own, they're having difficulties with maybe even small things that they feel are huge issues. But and there's a number of cases like that, and Brian will be able to even go on about it a little bit more than I. But that is the case, and time and time again you hear that it is those larger in life characters, So yeah.
I mean, there has been a sea change in the last couple of years, Paul, and I mean, I've watched it. I have a son who's around the same age as you, and I know that his generation, they were the post-Celtic Tiger Cubs, and they thought, because they grew up being told, look, the future's golden, it'll all fall into your lap, and of course 2008, 2009 happens, they're either going into college or just coming out of college, and the world's completely changed. All those expectations are gone, and a lot of them couldn't deal with it, a lot of them couldn't handle it. And it's not so much that they didn't know or that they weren't prepared to talk about their feelings, they didn't know how to.
Yeah.
Because it was never going to be on their agenda. Life was going to be golden for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think you're right, there has been a big shift, and like the likes of the work that the Pieta House do and other charities in the space, promoting the idea that it's okay to not be okay, and that like to having a talk about something can alleviate some of the difficulties that people may be facing. And I said earlier, like, it can be sometimes small issues that can be compounded on top of one another and can build up within someone, and make it just increasingly difficult for them to be able to get on with like the simple everyday tasks. But even just having that chat with somebody, a friend, or even if it's not a friend, maybe just going and having a talk with somebody to feel comfortable with, can really help you kind of get on with like your life, and maybe kind of.
You were saying to us there that back in 2012 you would never have dreamed of kind of intruding on somebody's personal space to the point of asking them that question, but now you wouldn't hesitate if you thought that there was even the slightest thing wrong, that you'd be straight in there saying, listen, are you all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even say, for instance, within the Dublin setup, like, like even little things, like, which mean, say, for instance, if a lad gets injured, or if, if say, for instance, someone maybe not playing well or maybe gets dropped, like, no problem now, picking up the phone and, like, ringing them and talking to them about it. And, like, that, they're really small things, but, that's the same in any day life. If, like, my friend had, like, if there was a bereavement in one of my friends' lives, I had no problem keeping in touch, ringing them. And likewise then as well, if I have like something that has been an issue for me, or maybe like eating away at me, I'll always reach out and like kind of maybe ask, whether it be my girlfriend or one of my friends, to have a quick chat about it, And you do feel like actually better when you just get it off your chest, and it's like the idea like you're a problem shared is a problem halved, and
most really definitely. And thinking you have support out there, and you were saying to us that following the death of your friend, you went and spoke to somebody, because it's good sometimes to speak to somebody objective, because you feel you're not encroaching on them, or they don't know something about it and they can help you work through it in a different way than a friend or family could, as well as that support.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you can just kind of put a bit of closure on some things as well that kind of are eating away at you. So,
Brian, can we bring you in here, CEO of Pieta House? It's interesting, over the history of this programme, which is now nearly 18 years, we met Joan Freeman in the early days, and we watched the growth of the organisation, and on one level we marvelled at the work she was doing, and then on another level we were horrified by the amount of work that she had to do, the amount of need there was for that, and we thought, we were talking about suicide as an epidemic. Is it still at those levels, or has it plateaued, or?
Well, statistically, thankfully, it has reduced a little bit since 2014, and that's really significant. But it is interesting that traditionally we have used the words epidemic, or they've been commonly used, and really, I'm not sure that the right terminology is.
Well, how do you describe 400, 500, 600, 700 deaths? Maybe more, because how many are unreported? You know.
I think it is the tip of the iceberg, and that's the difficulty. And I think when Joan started Pieta House back in 2006, it very much was the case that this was something that we didn't talk about, because there was such a stigma around talking about mental health. There was such a stigma about talking around suicide and also about self-harm. So part of the fight in the initial years was just to talk about it, to get people to accept that some deaths are caused by suicide, and we need to address this, and we need to talk about this in society. And that really, I suppose, is why we have the Time to Talk campaign with Lions Tea, is to say we have to do it. It is relatively simple to do, as Paul says. When you are in a position where you can talk to friends and ask them for advice and support, it does make things a bit easier.
This is a classic case of the ounce of prevention is worth several pounds a cure, isn't it? Because really, it's a shoulder.
Yes.
It's, you're not on your own. Actually, you're not the first person to encounter this problem. And by the way, there are some answers and some solutions. And solution number one is, as soon as you talk to me about it or talk to somebody else about it, you're going to start feeling better.
Yeah. I think in Pieta House, we've seen over 30,000 people since we opened in 2006. And I think we have worked in that intervention space. So for people who are actively suicidal and people who need that immediate support, we have been there and we will continue to be there. But I think we've realised that we need to be further upstream in preventing suicide. And really, preventing suicide, where that should begin, is preventing suicidal ideation and the things that lead people to become suicidal in the first place. And I know that people can say, well, talking about it, is that really going to help? Well, it is. It absolutely is going to help. That if people can talk about their issues, if people can talk to themselves about it and be aware of themselves, then we can be aware of each other. And Paul, I suppose, in terms of the Dublin GAA and that team sports, when people are at their peak performance, when people are under performance. And within a physical environment and physical health, it's very easy to say, is there something wrong with you? You're limping or you're just not playing on top form. But how do we get to the point where we can do that in terms of someone's mental health? And that's a position that we need to move further towards.
Well, that's sorry, Claire. It is a two-way street. You are talking about getting people to talk, but the other really important bit of that is that when they talk, we need to listen.
Absolutely.
And because we're all in our own little bubbles and we're leading very busy lives, and we all feel that there's we can't cope with the demands that we have, and that sometimes you might miss that person who's saying, I need, they put their hand up and you kind of go, oh yeah, look, I'll get you. And then they go off on their own and maybe, the cry wasn't helped or heard and they weren't helped, and they go and do something awful.
I think part of it too is that, Mark, it's the fact that everybody knows good listeners. There are go-to people within families, there's go-to people within teams and within workplaces where they say that they're a good listener, they're going to hear me. We need to get to the point where more and more people can see that and hear that, because we're all busy. All of us have other things to be doing. So it is certainly the case that somebody may be saying, can you give me 2 minutes? But we might not have 2 minutes to give them. So we need more people to be able to kind of pull up behind them and support people within that. It is, you talked earlier about when a suicide happens, when you look back on it. I think one of the things that we know is hindsight is an awful thing, because you can mull over what happened and you can look into what could have been done or what should have been done. And that isn't something that's helpful for that particular circumstance. But moving forward, I suppose we do have to look at how things happen and how we can try and help prevent them happening again in the future.
What is the right thing to say if somebody says, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling bad, I'm not happy? I mean, the go-to is, oh, sure, it's grand, everything's fine, you're great, you're this, you're that. What is the right thing to say to somebody who says that will be most helpful to them?
Well, I think it's interesting, you know, within this context, as CEO of Pieta House, a lot of people, when I'm asked the question, they mean at that really extreme end of where suicidal ideation is very real and
when it's
very
gone
present.
very far down, yeah.
And there is a reality that 1 in 4 of us will have mental health difficulties in our lives. But the reality is 4 in 4 of us have mental health. So if we can have that conversation, in most of those conversations, it isn't going to lead to anything more serious. So I think it's having the conversation, it's knowing a person, it's knowing whether, when they're asking for help, whether that is a real big issue where you need additional help yourself, or whether it's something that you can talk about over the kitchen table, over a cup of tea, and have that conversation. What I would say is, from our perspective, we have a national helpline, 1-800-24/7.
We've had it up on that, and it's been up all the way through the interview.
And I think what's important is if people can put that in their phone, we have fantastic staff, fantastic therapists right across the country and on our helpline. So if you are ever in that conversation where somebody says, I really need help, we are here. So you don't have to bear the burden yourself. You can absolutely ring Pieta House. If you need to come in and see us, you can do that. Thanks to the generosity of the Irish people, it has always been and will remain free. And the helpline is there as well. That's free.
Brilliant stuff, and it is great. I mean, Paul, sport and exercise has obviously been key to your mental strength. Do you think people should talk a little bit more about that and promote it in that way?
Yeah, sure. Like, you know, obviously I'm an advocate of sport and keeping fit, and I even find myself like that. You know, if you're injured and you can't train, or if you just go through a phase you're not you train as much as you usually do, you don't feel as well about yourself. There's a self-efficacy around training that kind of promotes, you know, self-esteem and that feel-good factor. You know, anyone who does a tough training session, it might be tough at the time.
It's the one thing that people expect to feel better physically, but what they don't anticipate is how much better mentally they will feel.
Exactly. So, you know, like that's why I would always promote sport as a kind of you know, a promoter of mental well-being as well. You know, so yeah, absolutely.
Just very quickly, before we finish up, Brian, Time to Talk, what do people, the Lions campaign?
So the Time to Talk Lions campaign is very simple. We're delighted to be in our 2nd year of the partnership with Lions Tea, and what we are encouraging people to do is talk. It's the 2nd year that we have the Pieta House branded tea bags. They're on the shelves in all good supermarkets and maybe not so good supermarkets and anywhere you want to buy them. But I think what's really important is somebody was asking me the impact of last year. And I suppose the question was asked in terms of how much money did it raise? And it did. It raised a fantastic amount of money to provide our services for free. But what I think is really important about it is when you open the tea box, there's a little flap, you know, to keep the tea fresh. But on that flap are all of the numbers and the details of the Pieta House centres across the country and our helpline. And I know for a fact that there are notice boards and fridges across the country where people have kept those. And I suppose the importance of this campaign is how often that's used. And it's resourcing people. So it's building resilience in families across the country where, whether it's on your windowsill or whether it's on your fridge, if you need Pieta House, if you need help, that's how you get us.
That's amazing. Keeps that free phone number free.
Kitchen table and a decent cup of tea. There's nothing you can't talk about.
Exactly.
Listen, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Didn't get to talk about the short kickouts, and we'll have to come back and talk about that next year. Might give the other teams some sort of a chance. Says a bitter Cork man. Take a break. We'll see you back here in a few minutes.